Hello, everyone, and welcome to 30 Minutes Robotic Milking Edition. I'm your host, Marcia Andrews, dairy science professor and extension specialist at the University of Minnesota in St. Paul. Today with us, we also have your co-host, Jim Sulphur, dairy extension educator at the St. Cloud Regional Office. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Marcia, and welcome, everyone.
Beautiful day today. We'll see how many people will be joining us live. So I will start with some housekeeping items before we bring our dairy producer guest today. These episodes are being recorded. So if you're watching as a recording and you want to join us live next time, please register at z.umn.edu/30 MINRM, so we can join the live webinar. I would ask that you use the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen to type your questions or comments, and that is what we will be monitoring. We'll not be monitoring the chat box, so please use the Q&A box. And then we will read your question or comment for the dairy producer to answer. So thank you for doing this for us, much appreciated. So today I would like to invite our dairy producer guest, Sam, to join us. Hi, Sam.
Hello, how are you?
And a special guest because Sam is a former graduate student in our department. So a young generation going back to the farm and bringing us some of his experience on a startup there. So thank you so much for being here, Sam, in a beautiful May day. So I know you could be doing some field work maybe, but I appreciate you taking these 30 minutes to be with us. So I'm going to go away and I'll have the slides moving, showing your pictures behind our faces here. So I'll go away and then you can talk about your farm for about 10 minutes and we'll open up for questions after that. So let me turn myself off and just a second here and I'll start your slides.
And Marcia, I advanced my own slides, is that correct? Or no?
No, I'll be advancing for you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm really happy to be able to talk today. As Marcia said, I do have a little bit of experience with the U. I did my master's there under Dr. Marshall Stern, and then went and got another degree over at Cornell University as a PhD in animal nutrition. And then in 2020, after working in the industry for a few years, my wife and I, here pictured Brenda, we decided to start up a dairy with her parents, Craig and Kathy. And we, yeah, it was a kind of a greenfield dairy for the most part. Craig and Kathy had milked cows up until about 2011, and they sold the cows at that point and turned it into a dairy steer operation. And so then we kind of came back into the area, and we were interested in kind of understanding the transition plan at the farm, and kind of put together, well, our expertise is in dairy, and we thought might as well jump in and try doing it this way. So we installed two Lely astronauts A5s in 2020. Fall of 2020 was our startup, and we've been milking since then. So Craig and I are the full-time on the farm here. Kathy and Brenda help out, although both have off-farm jobs as well. So yeah, it's kind of this is the crew. Just to kind of give you a brief overview of the barn itself. It's a pretty simple 2-robot design. The robots are up on the side of the 3-row barn, and they are in line. The robot arm comes in underneath the right side of the cow. So we have pass-through sorting. So you can kind of see there, I have on the maybe right-hand side of the barn from the picture here, I have sort of a catch pen area, so a fetch pen area. That's where I will bring fetch cows into, and then they go through the robot. And if I need to sort any cows off, I have that pass-through sorting, and they'll end up in the catch pen on the other side. And so that's about the size of one box stall, and it allows me to do most of my breedings over there, or do my any health treatments, or if I have a cow that I just kind of want to have on a nicer bedded pack for a day or two, I can. I don't have the ability to loop the cow back around to the robots. That has to be done manually. So it's, yeah, a pretty simple design, and that's kind of what spoke to us as we were touring a lot of facilities, and both Brenda and I had been out on a lot of farms before too, robot farms. So we kind of had a good idea of what we liked and what we saw. So kind of a picture overhead to kind of give you an idea of what our kind of manure system layout is. I'll touch briefly on that. Essentially, it's alley scrapers into the end of the barn. There's a chimney drop style, so it actually falls into the pit and comes out into the pit underneath the level of the manure. And so that keeps the barn kind of closed up a little bit better, and prevents the cold air from coming in and anything freezing up during the winter. So yep, that's how that works. This is a interior of the barn. It's a 3-row style, alley scrapers, and we basically kind of went through and tried to figure out what are the things that we want as necessities for the cows, really focusing on cow comfort. So we have it's a naturally ventilated barn, but we do have supplemental fans, and there's a sprinkler system as well. So that'll turn on in the summer and help keep the cows cool. Since we are in Minnesota, we do get fairly cold winters, and so we actually installed these air curtains on the barn, and those actually I've been pretty pleased with so far. They keep the barn really pretty tight in the winter. That way we can kind of control airflow fairly nicely, and I've been pretty pleased with the air quality through the winter in this barn, and then still having enough warmth to keep the alley scrapers going and keep the robots going. So they're 50-inch stalls bedded with sand. And yeah, we bed about once every 5 to 10 days, kind of depending on what's needed. Right now, it's a little bit more around that 10-day mark, but every 5 days at least, I go in and rake and level the sand stalls with a skid steer rake, and add sand about every 10 days. So just another kind of view of the feed bunk. This was during a vet check, so I had most of the cows locked up, but we feed PMR once daily, but it's 2 batches. And then we have a automatic feed pusher to push up the feed about every 2 hours during the night. It runs a little more frequently to keep the feed closer as the cows eat the bunk down. But they're fed typically between 5 and 7 in the morning. And yeah, pretty straightforward there. This is kind of an overview of the area around the robots. When we were designing the barn, we visited quite a few farms, and I have quite a bit of experience kind of around the world, actually, on the more nutrition management consulting side. And for us as a team, we chose to go with the free flow style. I wholeheartedly believe that both systems, guided flow and free flow, can work well. It just kind of depends on the style of management for the farm. We kind of like the simplicity of this design, and we were pretty sure that we'd be able to get the visits by opening up the area and making it so timid cows kind of had a lot of opportunity to get to the robot, getting around some of those dominant cows. And it's worked fairly well for us. I think we have good milkings. We're right now at about 2.8 milkings per day, right around 1.6 to 1.7 refusals, and my fetch list typically runs between 4 to 5% of the herd. So 130 cows or 65 cows per robot box right now. And yeah, I think the openness here is a big part of making sure that those timid cows can come in when they want to. This is kind of just a close-up of that fetch pen area. I kind of wanted to highlight a couple things that we did here. The cows calve a little bit of ways from this barn on the same site, but it's just we don't have good setup of gates or corrals or anything to get them over to the barn easily. So we trailer all the fresh cows and new heifers to this pen here. And I do most of my management of cows here in that old hoof trimming chute. So for the most part, that's just to kind of hold them securely and safely for when they come in for the calving, calving or other treatments. I do once in a while wrap a foot in that chute, but for the most part, hoof trim is done by the professionals. So yeah, this kind of has worked out as a nice little working area near the robots, but not in the robots, to try to keep those robots just for milking. You can kind of see we have a split entry gate there that allows it so that when I do a fetch, I can bring my fetch cows actually into that working area here. And they hang out in there until they have an opening to come into the robot. And since the robot door kind of opens, that they sort of have they have first go at the robot if there's two cows standing there trying to get into the robot. And so typically like my daily routine would be that I would come in the morning, sometime between 5:30 and 6, run my morning fetch and put any fetch cows I have in this pen, and then go feed calves, do a couple other little things, and come back to the barn. And they've pretty much worked their way through over that hour and a half. And so it's a pretty low touch, low maintenance kind of daily routine, which works well for us. This here is just an interior of the robot room itself. It's, again, we tried to keep things pretty simple. We don't do a lot in here other than, the routine milking type things. And then I guess one of the things I always tell people, at least when they're coming to tour the facility or just asking us questions, is keeping things clean has really helped us in a big way. You can catch things, I think, quicker. If there's a leak or an air leak or a milk leak or a water leak or whatever it might be, you can notice them a little bit quicker. And then it also just makes it, when you go to work on them, that it's a easy thing to do. You don't have to sit there trying to get some old crummy stuff off or yeah. I'd say the biggest thing is just keeping things clean so you can make these robots do what they're designed to do. I'll touch briefly on the kind of feeding setup that we do. My background is in nutrition management, so this was an area that I focused quite a bit on here. We kind of from the get-go knew that we didn't really want to be tied down to a custom pellet formulation or that added cost of pelleting a decent amount of the feed that goes into the cow. So what we did is we installed these bins here. We have two dry feed types going into the robots. One of them is hooked up to the smaller bin here. That's a 7-ton bin. And then the other feed type is the two big bins linked together. Each of those are 15-ton bins. So what this allows us to do is we can buy a semi-load of at this point, it's corn gluten pellets, and I can fit a whole semi between those two big bins. And that can make up a portion of the feed that's offered in the robot. And then the smaller bin here, we grind our own corn that we grow on the farm here. So we grind that as fine as we can and put it into this bin, and that's also fed through the robots. So it's allowed us to get away from a custom pellet, which has saved a lot of money, especially with the increased prices that we're at right now. Right now, we're feeding corn that cost us $3.50 to raise or $3.30 to raise. Now next year, that's gonna be a little different, but it's a good method for us to kind of keep our own feeds on our farm and have that flexibility of feeding. So that's been a big part of why I think we've got some good things going here with the feed system that helps us work well. This is a picture of our foot bath. And so this is something I just wanted to touch on. We decided not to do a foot bath anywhere near the robots for a couple of reasons. One, just keeping the area open and keeping cows comfortable coming to the robot for milking. We really viewed the robots as these are milking machines. They can help us with some of the sorting aspect of it, but beyond that, that's, we're not going to try to do a lot of other management things in the robots, of course. And so we wanted to move the foot bath away. The other reason was just the cleanliness and the chemical aspect. So I wanted to kind of keep any harsh chemicals away from the robots to help with their longevity. And then one of the things I grew up on a larger parlor type dairy, and then even just touring other robot farms, after a cow leaves wherever she was milking, she oftentimes defecates, right? So there's oftentimes the most manure right in that lane leaving the parlor or right in the first few steps out of the robot. So for us, putting a foot bath there just didn't make a lot of sense. So we run this foot bath when we do any of the bedding or leveling of the stalls. So at this point, we're really only running it once about every 5 days. It's a challenge sometimes to keep ahead of any hoof problems at that infrequent of use. So I do find myself every once in a while, if I have a couple problem cows, I can just run them through this alone, for 3 days in a row. And that sometimes will help. Or I might just have to do the whole herd a couple times a day in a row, and really try to get ahead of them. So that's, foot health is really important in robot herds. It's also a little more difficult to manage when you're not pushing them through alleys 3 times a day. But this so far has worked for us. We sometimes have more hoof problems than I'd like, but sometimes it works great. So yeah, it kind of goes up and down. Yeah, and that kind of covers our facility overview, and I guess I'll pass it back off to Marcia.
Thank you, Sam. Great overview. Very interesting, and appreciate again your participation. And now we're going to open up for questions, question and answer session. Jim can join us also. Jim Sulfur, who is, I think Sam,
Yes,
extension educator. So let me see here. We don't have open questions yet. So let me think about anything that, so we talked about feeding and we talked about food baths. How do you manage milk quality in your herd? How do you check for it and so on?
Yeah, that's been, sometimes challenging at times, just because you don't have that daily interaction with the cow, and you can oftentimes pick things up in a parlor maybe a little faster than you might in the robot. We have cell count testers and of course conductivity on each quarter, but we do have the MQCC system. That has been helpful to help identify those cows that are, higher cell count, and help us determine, okay, who do we need to go look at a little bit closer. The kind of, I'd say, downside of it is it's not, always totally accurate, and it's not always totally reliable. Of all the pieces of equipment on the robot, I'd say that the cell count testers are the ones that I have to work on a little more often.
So what do you mean they're not reliable? Meaning, so you don't think they're measuring accurately, is what you're saying?
From an accuracy measure, I don't really have much to.
Oh, okay.
We don't test. We
sure.
Right. Test, so I don't have anything to go from there. But it, I think it does a good job of differentiating cows.
Okay.
And then I think from the bulk tank average, from what the creamery says the somatic cell count is, to what the system says,
it's very close. Okay.
Yeah, within 20,000.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So that seems to work. But yeah, sometimes you have to take it with a grain of salt. So I'll oftentimes, if I have a cow that I'm worried about, I'll separate her after milking, and then I'll use a CMT to help verify what's going on.
Sure.
We're kind of in the process of setting up some on-farm culture. It's just we haven't done it yet, but
okay, sure. And then there is also an extra cost, right, Sam, for that system in terms of reagents and things? Is it a high cost or not very much?
The unit itself is a option to add to the robot, but then there's a little small expense with each cow that you run. Reagent cost. I actually don't know off the top of my head what that reagent cost is per cow or per month, whatever it might be.
It's not very. I mean, it's not a ton of money, probably. That so
right. It's not something we have targeted as an opportunity to reduce costs, because we think it's needed.
Okay, but then you do it at daily, or do you do it every other day, or do you do how often do you test?
In the system, I believe it's every 3 milkings.
Every 3 milkings, so basically could almost be once a day, because you're milking 2.8 times. Okay. Yep. But you have the flexibility as a producer to decide if you want to test more or less often, probably.
Yeah, there's some settings in the system that allow you to test more or less. Yeah.
Sure, sounds good. Jim, I don't see your camera appears to be on, but I don't see you, so I don't know what's going on. Let's see if we have.
That's interesting, because I can see myself. So.
Oh, now you showed up, but you should be showing everybody. So I don't like this. Never happened before.
What happened?
No idea. Zoom. So beautiful. Anyway, so when we're not speaking, I guess only 2 people are showing up, but I do have the whole gallery open, so it should show all of us. And I have no idea what's going on. This is the first time this happened. Sorry. So somebody wrote something in the chat, which again, we ask, please, that you don't do the chat. Can you use the Q&A, please? But we'll ask this one, Jim. Can you find it in the chat there, please?
Sure, yeah. There's one in Q&A too. What is your objective for milk amount? So what are some of the metrics that you kind of look at? Milk per robot or milk per cow, and Just kind of those typical metrics, somatic cell count.
Yeah, yep. So from a milk standpoint or productivity standpoint, kind of look at a few of them simultaneously, I'll say. Really one of our goals is to sort of maintain over 6,500 pounds of energy corrected milk per box. And so that's going to come into milk per cow components and also stocking on the box. So trying to keep those robots at capacity. So at the end of the day, we can't drop a shift for labor and save on labor. You know, if we have fewer animals or, you know, run the parlor 2 less turns or whatever per milking, we can't do that. The you know, loan that we have for the robots is kind of a fixed amount. And so if we can get more cows through the robot or more milk per robot, that's going to be directly influencing our bottom line. So yeah, we're shooting for that 6,500 pounds of energy corrected milk. So right now we're achieving that. Our goal is to maintain that number throughout the year, and then next year we'll set a new goal and go for that. What that translates to for us right now is about 94 pounds of milk shipped, 4.26% fat and 3.2 protein is what our current milk fat components are. Translates to about 105 pounds energy corrected per cow. We have today, right now, 65 cows per box. And we typically try to keep it between that 62 to 65. We've been up as high as 67, but then I dried off a few cows. So, and honestly, the milk shipped per day didn't really change that much at that time. So it kind of indicated to me that maybe we were cutting a few milkings away from those high cows,
right? You
know, just spending time on those low cows that we didn't really need to. From a milk quality standpoint, we run between 150 and 180 somatic cell count. I'd like it to be a little bit lower. It's something that we're, you know, maybe with the on-farm culturing, we're kind of hoping we can start to do a little more targeted treatment and decisions on culls, because as a startup, we were really running a really low cull rate, just trying to keep the barn full for a little while. But now with some of our own heifers coming in, we can start to make more decisions on optimizing cow throughput and, you know, milk quality, repro, that sort of thing. So.
Okay. Yeah. That's great. Because I mean, you guys had to buy all your cows, so you never know what you bought with it, right? In terms of milk quality and all that, just always kind of a bit of a gamble in the sense that if you brought something, do you have any contagious pathogens that you know of?
Not that we know of right now.
Oh, good. Okay.
So that's, our bulk tank culture has always been pretty good. And yeah, you know, when we have a cow that we just kind of suspect, we'll maybe, you know, test or culture and then send if we need to. But then, yeah, I mean, we bought cows from a neighboring herd that was selling out, and they were really kind of, I'd say, a diamond in the rough a little bit, because they had an older facility and they were just ready to not be in that facility anymore. But they were really good cows, really well cared for cows, really clean cows. They had a very low somatic cell count. They were sand bedded, free stall. So we got, I think that was a good purchase there. We did purchase some more younger animals from a local larger herd. Another, I think, really good purchase. That they have been very productive and good cows. I've been very happy with them. We did purchase about 20 robot trained cows from another well managed herd. Just thinking that would help during startup.
Yeah,
I'd say it did and it didn't. You know, the first couple milkings was helpful, but then I don't really think it was worth paying a premium for or anything like that.
Interesting.
From our perspective, at least.
Okay, that's interesting to know. Yeah. So switching gears a little bit about feeding here. What happens if you can't get corn gluten?
Yeah, that would be a risk for us. There may be some other opportunities with other feeds. You know, there's a couple other pelleted feeds that I'd probably look at and could figure out how to work into the ration. But a little bit of the challenge is right now we feed about 10.5 pounds of concentrate per 100 pounds of milk, is what our level of robot feed is between both the corn gluten and the ground corn. But I think there's a kind of a limit on how much ground feed I can push through the robots before the cows start refusing more and having feed bowls build up. Right now they lick them clean. We're feeding about an average of 5 pounds of ground corn and 0.5 pounds of gluten per 100 pounds. So I think that blend of the pellet and the ground corn gives the cows enough time, or gives the cows a high enough eating rate to finish their allotment in the given number of milkings they have. Because the ground corn or ground feeds, they just eat slower, grams per minute than they would with a pelleted feed. So
Right. Jim?
So Sam, there's a question. Share your milking, like your vacuums, your takeoff settings. I don't know if you have a lot of flexibility in that, any milk access settings or anything around that. People are intrigued by the amount of milk you get with the feeding. And then are you using rubber liners was the other question.
Okay. So we are using Lely's silicone liners. We have since the start. I've kind of explored a few different options. We've never actually tried anything different because we've slowly been seeing milking speeds come up. So right now we're at 8, our milk speed's 8.0 pounds per minute for on the Lely silicone liners. So we've been pretty happy with teat health or teat end health on that too. So I don't really have a big reason to change yet. Maybe as we get more cows coming in, or if I need to start to find some free time, maybe it's something to explore. I don't know.
What's your prep settings? There's a lot of discussion as I get on robot settings, kind of the prep procedure settings. You double wash, or what do you do there?
It's a double brush.
Double brush, I mean.
Yeah. So it comes in, brushes, comes out, washes, comes back in, brushes, and dries. And I think it's on 4. I think it's 4 seconds right now for the brushing time for each time. I'd have to look. Honestly, it's not something that I have played around with a lot at this point. And it's, I know our prep time is typically just under 2 minutes is our prep time. Or maybe just over, right around that 2-minute mark.
So you have the 8 seconds total, right? Because 4 and 4 for the brushes.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay,
so.
and that's what the research in Europe showed that Lely did. Actually, that was best. It, improves milking time and reduce dead milk time, etc. So that's probably the recommendation here in the US is to do that, right?
Yeah, our dead milk times typically are pretty steady around 8 to 9 seconds.
Okay. Yeah. And then your free time for the robot, do you know what that is?
Free time right now we're running around 8 to 10%.
Okay.
A lot of the times I'd like to be a little lower, but the Lely Center wants it to be a little bit higher.
I know. That's the thing we're trying to figure out, Jim and I too, because that's kind of close to a little bit our average. Maybe our average is a little more than that, but they recommend at least 10, right?
Yeah.
And then
when I run 4 to 5% free time, I get good milk per robot. And as long as everything is good in the barn, and I basically, as long as I'm not in the barn, I can keep that 5% fetch cow, benchmark that I'm kind of shooting for. If we have, maintenance, or if I'm in there doing some herd work, just anything that sort of disrupts the cows, I can start to see. Typically where I see it is number of fetch cows starts to creep up a little bit. And then if we have a big thing, like, we do vet check every 2 weeks. So that typically will throw them off, if I'm really tight on free time. And then if we have some maintenance or downtime on the robots, I understand that's one of the reasons why Lely likes to have more 10%.
Right.
At the end of the day, I can deal with the 5 days a year that I might have, a little bit of a disruption from a downtime on a robot. If the other 360 days of the year I can milk 3 more cows, that's pretty easy money.
So you kind of, you're looking at economics of all that, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense, right, to you, and you being able to manage that many cows. Not everybody does that, but looks like it's working well for you.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I've got a question that maybe a lot of people are wondering about, is that so many of these new barns are not naturally ventilated. They're almost all tunnel ventilated, cross ventilated. How'd you decide on a naturally ventilated barn?
Yeah. I grew up on naturally ventilated barns. I kind of just liked having things open and not having to run fans for a decent number of days of the year. So that kind of aspect played into it. I've been in a lot of tunnel ventilated barns. And then when we were touring dairies as a group, as a team, I know Craig and Kathy both kind of felt they liked the open feel of a naturally ventilated barn a little better. We're kind of in a nice spot where we have good open south exposure. So we do have a good amount of air coming into the barn. And we're in a kind of windy area. So that all helped us. If we were kind of down in a valley, or if we were Had a lot of wind blocks, we might have to be doing something, would have had been doing something different, but where this barn is sited, it actually catches a good amount of breeze when it needs to, and then a lot of wind when it doesn't.
What about winter time? Is it more challenging because, you know, it's such an open barn?
Well, those curtains, those air curtains for us, really, they're pretty nice and tight. So at the end of the day, I mean, we had, I think the first winter was 2021, that February of 2021 here, we had 3 weeks where we didn't see zero. You know, we were negative numbers for 3 weeks in a row. By about the second week, you know, things were starting, the frost was creeping in further and further in the end of the barn. But for the most part, having that pretty nice and tight sidewalls, and then I can control the last foot of the curtain pretty easily. And then we do have chimneys instead of an open ridge line. We do have chimneys placed every 20 feet or something like that. That's worked well for us. You know, it doesn't have quite the turnover in the summer because it's not an open ridge, but it does have a good amount of draw in the winter and helps me get moisture out of the barn and keep things working. So.
Excellent. We reached the 30 minutes. Hard to believe, time flies. So
Yeah.
I want to thank you everyone for attending today, and special thanks to Dr. Sam for being with us today, and invite all of you to join us back on June 16th for our next episode. Thank you everyone. And if you have a couple minutes, anybody has any other questions, maybe you could stay for a few minutes. Otherwise,